Hello everyone, I'm Parker. Look at this cat. Is Smokey. Is he a living thing or non-living thing? If you say a living thing, you're correct. What about these fishes? What are they doing? They're moving. Are they living or non-living thing? If you guess living things, you are correct. What about this plant and these two other plants that are behind me? Are they living or non-living things? If you guess living things, you're correct. And finally, well, me. Am I a living thing? Yes, I am a living organism. Now, what about this dry leaf? Is this dry leaf a living or non-living thing? If you say non-living thing, you're correct. What makes the difference between living things and non-living things different? The difference is that living things have the same characteristic of life, while non-living things only have none or only a few. The seven characteristics of life or the life processes are movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. A good way to remember these seven characteristics of life is by an acronym called Mrs. Gran or Mrs. Nerg. Now, let's go through each of these seven characteristics of life. The first is movement. Movement is described as an action of organism or a part of it that changes a position or place. For example, I am walking, a fish swimming, or a dog's tail wagging. What plants? Do they move as well? Yes, they do. For example, the roots of plants will travel towards sources of water or nutrient in the soil, while the leaves and the flowers will often turn towards the sun. I can see in this plant, the plants and the trees are moving this way because when we went outside, the sun was facing here. The second is respiration. Respiration are chemical reactions that break down nutrient molecules in the body to make energy for metabolism and other chemical reactions. Note, metabolism are chemical processes that break down or build up molecules or proteins. For example, there are two types of respiration: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration are chemical reactions that use oxygen. For example, in the mitochondria of cells, the glucose is along with oxygen is converted into carbon dioxide and water for energy. Anaerobic respiration are chemical reactions that do not use oxygen. And an example is when we do rigorous exercise. When we do rigorous exercise, our muscles don't get enough oxygen, and thus they convert the glucose into lactic acid, which is a byproduct that can cause muscle cramps. Another example is with yeast. With yeast will convert the glucose into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Note that yeast can do both aerobic and anaerobic respiration. It just depends whenever the environment has oxygen or doesn't have. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to do a little experiment. So here I have two glass. One has mouth open, the other has mouth closed. And I'm going to put each of them some yeast, sugar, It's okay if you make mistake because sometimes it gets a little bit messy. And finally, some warm water. I'm gonna I'm gonna leave it to us. We're gonna leave it to aside for now, and after the lesson we'll check them back. But for now, let try to make prediction on what will happen with the two classes. Now, the third is sensitivity. Sensitivity is the ability to detect or sense stimuli in the environment and make appropriate responses. For example, when our hand touch something hot, our body reacts to it by moving our hand away from it. Or when light is shined to our face, the body reacts to it by closing our eyelids. Or with the fishes, when I put my hand in water, the fishes react by moving towards it or moving away from it. See, when the fish move away from my hand. Note, plants are also sensitive to stimuli too. For example, the touch me not plant or Musosa pudica in the scientific term, or the shame plant. This plant reacts to an environment when it is touched or threatened by closing leaves. No, this is not the touch not plant. This is different. Or for example, note that when we talk in this, we're not talking about emotion in this context of biology. So emotion have nothing to do here. Emotional sensitivity. Now, the fourth is growth. Growth is when there is an increase in body size and dry mass. This is caused by an increase in the cell number or the cell size. Dry mass is the amount of matter that is in an organism that is without the water. For example, you can see these dry leaves. The water inside these leaves have been dried out, evaporated. And so what remains left is the dry mass. Examples of growth is, for example, a seed growing from a plant to a tree, like this. When we just planted this plant, it didn't change much and it stayed as seed. But in day 2, it began to germinate and it began to sprout roots. A few days later, the stems shot up from the soil and leaves start to grow. And after a week, the plant has now grown into an adult. Or, for example, with humans. With humans, for example, when the sperm and egg combine into embryo, it forms an infant. And that infant will, after a few years, turn to child, and then after that, an adult. The fifth one is reproduction. Reproduction is the process of making more of the same organism. There are two types, asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction only requires one parent and creates a cloned offspring. For example, the spider plant. The spider plant reproduces by shooting out a long arched stem into the soil. And in that location, a new clone offspring of the original parent called a spiderlet forms. Or for example, with bacteria, after a few minutes, the bacteria start to multiply and divide. And soon, from one bacteria, there'll be a colony of them. The second type is asexual reproduction. This requires two parents, a male and a female, and will create a unique offspring by the genetic inheritance of the two parents. Despite requiring more energy and more time, this This way has a big advantage, which is that the offspring will be unique to the parents. How unique is it? How beneficial it is? Well, take for example, a disease hits the ecosystem. If the disease can affect one of the organisms, some of the other organisms are different from the others and thus are immune to the disease. And thus, when the disease wipes out most of the organisms, some of them still remain. Or while with organisms that do asexual reproduction, despite they can multiply faster and reproduce more faster quickly, if a disease hits the ecosystem and can infect one of them, all the other organisms will be infected. The sixth is nutrition, is excretion. Excretion is the process of removing toxic materials, waste, or excess nutrients from the body. An example is, for example, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a gaseous waste and is exhaled through the lungs by exhaling after inhaling this. Inhaling, exhaling. When we exhale, we release the carbon dioxide from the lungs into the atmosphere. Or take for example, urine. Urine is made of two main substances: urea, a toxic substance, and excess water. These two substances are excreted by the bladder and by peeing. Note, excretion should not be confused with egestion, which is the process of removing undigested food like feces. And the final one, the seventh, is nutrition. Nutrition is just how the organism consume nutrients in order to grow, survive, and develop. Note, all organisms, including plants and bacteria, need nutrients to survive. However, every organism has its own way of taking in nutrients. Like for example, with humans and other animals, we take in the nutrient by eating and digesting it. Or with plants need glucose and oxygen for energy to live, but they can synthesize it by photosynthesis, which is sunlight. Or for example, bacteria don't have a mouth, but they still take in nutrients. How? Well, the way that nutrients in this ecosystem will enter the cell membrane of the bacteria and by osmosis, like in passive diffusion or in active diffusion. And so we have now finished the 7 characteristics of life. And now it's time to look at our experiment. As you can see, both of them have bubbles. These bubbles contain filled with gas. And the one that is lid open, it smells like nothing. Sometimes a bit like fruity bit, but mostly it just smells like nothing. The air. This is the glass that oxygen can enter through the glass. Now this is the one that has its lid closed. If I smell it, it smells a bit bitter, like alcohol. It smells a bit alcoholic. And thus, this is the one that has been its lid mouth closed. Why did this one smell like alcohol but this one doesn't? It's because that when we close the mouth of it, the yeast in it didn't have enough oxygen for aerobic respiration, and thus some of them did anaerobic respiration and thus produced alcohol. While the one that had its mouth open, all the yeast was able to use oxygen for aerobic respiration and thus just created carbon dioxide in the bubbles. So what do you guess? Did you guess this one did anaerobic and this one did aerobic? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the lesson and Happy New Year!